Hi, I'm Jennifer Carter, and thank you for joining me on a podcast for parents, teachers, and administrators. Today's conversation should be a good one, and I'm sure it's something on your mind. So let's get to it. So thank you so much, Doreen, for joining me on Mrs.C's podcast for parents, teachers, and administrators. Can you just give us a little bit of information about your background, what you do, and what's your connection to education?
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Doreen Johnson, and I serve as the Dean of Studies at Ransom Everglades School in Miami, Florida. And I work with middle school students, and that is my connection to education. I have been working with middle school students for more than 20 years, and it has been the joy of my professional life.
How do you what's one thing about middle school students that is different about any of the other levels that you've taught?
Oh, boy. I would say, I think it's all different. There are a lot of differences, but the thing that stands out about a middle schooler is that they still have that youthful goodness about them, and they are willing to help anybody with anything. And that is the thing that always stands out to me the most about a middle school student. If you keep them busy and helping somebody, they are the happiest people on the planet.
I think that's true, because I actually worked at a middle school before I, got this crazy idea to start business for myself. I worked at a middle school for 10 years, and we did the same. I did the job you're currently doing. And before we got started, we were just sort of talking about how education is cyclical in nature and things come around again and again and again. And so I think at that middle school age, many times parents freak out. I noticed that's what's different about parents. In high school, they freak out about grades to get in. In middle school, they just kind of freak out about everything. Hormones, friendships. Am I giving them allowance? So what kinds of things do you tell parents? Well, it's kind of a two-part question. What kind of things do you tell parents not to freak out about, especially, and this is the second part, when it comes to education, because we've seen stuff come around so much?
Okay. Yes. Well, with education, yes, a lot of times parents are very concerned because I think that parents don't understand how much students grow from year to year. It's the second time in their lives when children grow the amount that they do, from when they're infants, of course, and then when they move into that 11, 12 range, they're growing, and that they're going to find some things and do some things that they might not normally do. And but if you serve as a loving guide to them, they're going to be okay. If there's a handbook, if there's some set of guidelines that the school provides, follow the guidelines. They're not written to trouble anybody. They're written to help the situation. And so if we can, help each other out with the situation, then that helps to kind of take away some of the stress that's involved with bringing up a youngster who's in school. So follow along, not so much be a follower, but follow along with the rules. If you see that your child's outside of those boundaries, push them on back in and, make sure that they're...
You know what? I've never really framed it that way. You encourage parents to do that, but I think I never really thought about it like that. Encouraging parents to just read through the handbook and sort of see where the school's boundaries are. And when kids push up against them, hold them firm. And if they don't know how to hold them firm, that's what they have the school for, as a resource to, here's some strategies to help you hold these boundaries at home, and we will do the same thing at school. I think that's fantastic advice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's worked for me, but it's also, it works, but sometimes it's a little troubling to parents because they feel that, they've tried everything. Sometimes it's something as simple as revisiting that handbook, talking to someone who works with children every day, and that makes a difference.
And it's not necessarily, I know that parents tend to disregard the handbook, but the handbook isn't just rules. It also provides insight to approaches at the school. So in
Yes.
other words, the handbook will let you know, here's why we do what we do. Here's why we teach this way. Here's why there's this much homework. Here's even why we have school dances or why we socialize or whatever the case may be. It gives a lot of answers and insight so that parents kind of know the rationale. And then it reading those handbooks really offers an opportunity to reduce reaction,
Yes.
because then you'd have people who never read them and they're like, what do you mean nudity is not allowed at school? And you're like, well, it's kind of in the handbook. We have a dress code,
Right.
It's like no one's surprised if, oh, okay, I read this and I understand this is how my kid has to dress every day.
Yes. Yes. And then it takes the pressure off the parents because you're supporting their child. The school is supporting the child at school, and the parent is supporting their own child by helping them to follow the school's expectation. And then
Mhm.
that way, we have less of some of those negative experiences that come along with,
Mhm.
having to be corrected and that
Mhm.
sort of thing.
Mhm. Well, I also actually think it's a positive, very positive, especially for middle school, because middle school, and I used to say this to parents all the time. Your middle school boy comes in this big,
Mhm.
and it's like when you warm your hands together and it gets hotter and hotter. That's what's happening inside your kids, so that there's an explosion of growth for when he gets
Yes.
to high school. And with all that internal combustibility, it's unpredictable. Boys, you see it because they will grow significantly.
Right.
Girls, their bodies change, but it's the same level of combustion inside.
Right.
When you help your children understand, you're going to get out of control and we're here to help you maintain control, I think that's comforting the students because they don't often understand why they're making crazy choices. Why
Yes.
am I crying all the time? Why am I talking back? Why am I doing these things?
Right.
And no one gives them the heads up like it's normal and eventually it'll stop, but it's going to drive everyone around you crazy for a little while, including
Right.
you, you know.
Yes. Yes. Well stated. Yes. Yes.
So how do you deal with that combustibility? Is that a word? And that combustion, at your school and in your position as Dean of Studies?
Alrighty. So yes, the combustion is happening. That is my life. It happens at different times for different children, so there's never a dull moment. But you know, for my position as dean of studies, I see it show up in the grades. I see it show up in the classroom behavior and that sort of thing. And so I support the students and the teachers and their parents and or the students, excuse me, the teachers, the students, and the students' parents, in helping them to understand that it's going to be okay. But then also, you have some obligations here. And so, now once you see me, that means that you're either asking for a letter of recommendation or you've had some academic troubles. And so it's usually the academic troubles. And we work it all out. We have discussions about how to manage the assignment, how to manage the planner, how to manage the time, and the materials, and making sure that there is a common respect for both of us. So when
Mhm.
students come into the meeting, some of them are really uptight because they don't want to see the dean, and some of them show it in different ways. Some of them are really grateful when the period is over, grateful as in they could breathe again. Some of them are grateful because they feel like, oh, I learned something because I actually hold scholarly sessions with the children to help them understand. There's a scholar in there. You just have to, figure out how it works for you. How does that work for you? And when but some of the children, are feel a little upset and may show some defiance, and I let them know, these can be long sessions, or these can be short sessions, but we're having a session, and and we work together and try to get through that. And but the constancy is there, where I just show up as the same person every day, smile at the children, and let them know it's going to be okay. smile at the parents, let them know it's going to be okay, and smile at the teachers and let them know it's going to be okay. And so everybody gets the same message. And I sound like I'm saying the same thing to everyone because I am, but I say it in different ways depending on the situation. But the goal is just to make sure that everyone knows that, we can't just let the problem get out of hand. We can turn this thing around and it's going to be all right. And we just have to work our way through it.
Mm-hmm. And I think adding that perspective that it's normal, and I'm sure you've said in meetings, like, I've seen situations like this before and this usually works, or something to that effect, to give parents and students some indicator that this is not an insurmountable, or it's not like some kind of like I watch the TV show New Amsterdam, and they always come up with some crazy ailment that, it's hard to say. Like, we don't really encounter that kind of crazy ailment in education. It's usually something very familiar and something very fixable. Right. And helping parents and children see that. Teachers reminding them that you've had this kid, a version of this before, we can get through it as well.
Right. Right.
What's your go-to strategy to help kids? Like, what's the strategy that you use or that kids need the most?
When I meet with students, I usually ask them, tell me about what you would like to achieve as a student. And some of them will tell me exactly what it is that they would like to achieve. I want to go to college one day. I want to be a doctor. I want to play soccer when I go to college, that kind of thing. And, and I ask them about that what their purpose, their goal, that sort of thing. And then I ask them, how can I help you get there? What's the best thing I can do to help you? And a lot of times they don't really have an answers. And I just tell them, I'm going to help you with your planning. I'm going to help you with your organizing, and I'm going to help you just make this thing all work so that way you feel successful. Because at the end of the day, I always tell them, I just really want you to feel good about yourself as an individual, and then also about your work as a student.
And that's probably really, it's like mooring, giving them a firmer foundation, because a conversation like that will, in the midst of all the stuff that's going on, give them like at least a little bit of clarity, because they're not necessarily thinking as, all over the place. At my previous school, we built in reflection, and kids hated it. I'm just going to be honest. They hated it. And they would have to write down reflections for assignments. They would, we did an end of the year portfolio where there was an academic piece and then a creative piece. They had to write down what they learned about their own learning and put it into narrative form, and then share that with their parents. But they hated it until they realized the discoveries they made about themselves and how those discoveries helped them become more and more successful as they matriculated. Right. Because that conversation of planning that you describe, in most schools, it doesn't happen, and I understand, like in public schools, there may be a volume of kids and it may be difficult to get that many kids to, participate in something that's really reflective, but, or maybe it doesn't fit a pacing guide, but without that understanding of yourself, it makes it very, very, who else is going to tell you? Who else is going to lead you through that process?
Right.
And I will be pretty blunt, like Black and brown students who come from families that may be blue collar, working class, there may not be a model for that kind of pause within the dynamics of the household. And I say that not because Black and brown people don't know how to reflect, but the data that we have suggests that oftentimes children will come from households where, parents are working in situations that don't give them the time to reflect and pause. I think about students at our preschools, and the parents at our schools. And it's kind of either in, where we have people who work at Amazon, for example, and it's just packages all day.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other end, we have people who are like lawyers, and it's just work all day. And
Right.
there is no time for them, parents, to sit and pause and think, like, what did I learn about my job? How can I do better? It's just not
Right.
even possible.
Right. Right. And we have the great good pleasure of working in one of those professions where that reflection is key, because eventually we're going to perhaps see that situation again and have to address it, or teach that lesson again and have to address it. How do we make it better the next time? And sometimes, I guess, if you do work at different sorts of jobs, your customers are your reflection. Do they come back? Do they let you know if they were satisfied or not? So
Yeah, I guess if
uh,
they start yelling at you, you know that you said something they didn't like,
right.
that instant reflection. I mean,
Yes.
we get a lot of that in education too, where as
Yeah.
educators, we don't necessarily, we're not encouraged to reflect and pause. So maybe
Right.
I want to take back my original statement. I'm always thinking of kids that fall into the achievement gap.
Hmm.
So my go-to is always thinking about Black and brown students. But
Hmm.
now, the more we're talking, the more I realize maybe it's just our society. Because do you get chances to, like, okay, staff, as part of our staff development, we're going to come up with a way to reflect on the school year and recalibrate for the coming year? Do you get a lot of that?
We do not. We tend to do it at the beginning of the year. What would you like to do? Everyone's excited, that sort of thing. But but the reflection at the end of the school year. No, we are looking at what we can do for next year for the children
Mm.
in our articulation meetings. But we don't necessarily look at what we need to do. We are encouraged to um, complete some sort of professional development over the summer, but every teacher knows, over the summer you're just trying to recover from the school year for the first 5 weeks, and the next 5 weeks you're trying to maybe get a jump on your lesson plans if you can. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so I have to say, sometimes you have to make yourself do the reflection, and I um, have been really fortunate in my career to have had that opportunity.
Hmm.
So when I was earning my working towards my national board certificate, I had the opportunity. One of the pieces is reflection. It's all about the reflection, and so that was intense, but it was a good habit to get into,
Hmm.
because sometimes you teach for years, and you're working real hard, and next year with the same November project comes up, and October 31st you're trying to get it in order, and as opposed to maybe taking it a little piece at a time. It's November 15th. Let me see how that unit's going. And when
Hmm.
it finishes on November
Hmm.
30th,
Hmm.
let me write down the 5 things I'm going to fix about this particular unit, and then keep moving. So that
Hmm.
way, next year when it comes around, I'm ready for it.
Right.
And that was the thing that I really appreciated about that experience. And there's my
Yeah.
certificate there.
Oh,
So,
nice. I
yes.
remember when you were working on that.
Yes, yes. Oh my goodness. So this is the second time around. So this will when this cycle ends, that will be 20 years. And
Wow.
shocking how quickly the years have gone by.
Has it been 20 years? Oh,
Well, I got the first one in November 2009, and then I um, recertified back in 2019.
I can't even believe how I'm not even going to talk about time as a constant reminder. But the reflection, I'll distract us with talking about reflection so we don't think about how old we are. I had a
How
similar
young we are.
how young we are.
Try to frame it in a way that
Um, I Part of my teacher training back at Wittenberg, we had to do a lot of reflection, and it like you said, it just becomes habit, and that's one of the things that has served me well throughout my career. My professors would always say, whatever happens in the classroom, you're responsible for, positive or negative.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't to blame, it was to remind you you have the ability to have an impact on what's going on in the classroom. So if your kids are rowdy, you don't like it, then you can change that. If your
Right.
kids don't talk in class, you can change that. If you feel like you're doing hours and hours of grading, you can change that too, and change how you structure your assignments or pace the work. And then how that translates with the other, because we talked about parents and we talked about teachers and students, but we really haven't talked about how what we do is like a middle between parents, students, and administrators, because there's a lot that you have to then articulate to your principals and help them understand that they may be missing. So what's your kind of go-to thing to tell your principal, which is tricky because that's also your boss, so to speak.
Right. Right. Yes. Yes, indeed. So one thing I just wanted to take back to what you were saying about your time at Wittenberg with whatever happens in the classroom, you're responsible for. In my education program, we were taught you were the leader of that classroom. And and I, stunning to hear it placed that in that manner, but you really are. There might be a child with some leadership skills, but they're not the adult. The teacher is the adult in the classroom. You are the leader of the classroom. And in
Mm-hmm.
much the same way that teachers are the leader of the classroom, and parents are the leaders of the family, and children are the leaders of themselves, the administrators are the leaders of the school. And it's really important just to tell them the truth, whether they like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been something that has worked and has been beneficial for me throughout my career, that I just go ahead and tell them the truth, however it may be, whatever comes with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I've gotten older, I have had to add the line, please feel however you would like to about this, but this is what is going on. Because I don't have time for alternative truths. I'm like, I work with
I
children.
love that. But you said, listen, you can feel how you want to feel. This truth is not going to suddenly change because you're upset about it. And that is so true, especially when you're telling leadership. Like, sometimes you have to tell them it's to the work expectation. When you look at how much homework everyone's giving,
Right.
it's too much for kids to do. And, you may have a principal that says, but we want to uphold our academic standards. And you're like, by killing everybody, by making everybody mentally unwell, like, it's not going to change the fact that if it takes kids 6 hours to do homework, it's not going to change that as a fact. And that's not like the outliers. That's like the average.
Right, right. And then to take it to another level, well, I mean, when you leave here at whatever time you leave here, do you go home and work for 6 hours? We know
Ain't
that's
nobody
probably
working
not
6
true.
more hours.
Right, right. So why would you send a 12-year-old home with a backpack full of books that weighs more than they do and 6 hours worth of work? We have to, figure it out.
Yes.
And that's something that is a highlight of the role that I have, making sure that we understand how to figure it out. That more is not always better.
It's
Sometimes
never
you do,
better.
right, and sometimes you have to. You have those nights where you might have a little something that's going to take you some time, but and then you have those nights where you might have little to nothing in a particular class. But that doesn't mean, so we have to find the balance. But it doesn't mean that every night is, a torture session for a young person and their parents. Because if the child is giving their parents a hard time about it, that it's coming back to school. The parents are going to come to the school and articulate their concern. But then also that goes back to the handbook, where in the old days, the handbook, the principal had no problem telling parents, put your child in a quiet room with no distractions and this, that, and the other. And
Wait, they don't still do that?
well, it's a little different. It's not as frank anymore.
Interesting.
I mean, people make that suggestion, but nowadays people don't. It's not the same. We don't live in the same world, as when we started teaching back in the '90s, where you could
Hold on,
still.
wait. I'm going to take issue with that.
Yes, yes.
noise is noise,
Yes.
distraction is distraction.
Yes.
So how is that different from the 90s to now?
Parents and children are different. People receive information differently now. People see it as an intrusion on of their parenting. If you tell a parent they need a quiet room with no noise and no things, in the old days, it might have been a ball and jack that was, carrying a child away, or a comic book. Nowadays, it might be a phone. It might be a video game that's calling a child away from their studies. And so, if we find some place for them to study, we want that, but some of those kind of old-fashioned ideologies that educators used to be able to share with parents on the large scale doesn't really happen as much as it used to because of the tension between parents and schools.
Mm.
And we mean well. We want their children to do well, but sometimes people don't understand meaning well so that they can be successful when they go to the school that they attend, as opposed to an intrusion of their personal space and time.
Well, I'm going to say, because it's my podcast and I can, any parent hearing this who thinks it's an intrusion is hearing it not in the way that it's meant. Because there are, you can Google it, you can go on and look up academic papers about distraction and distractibility. And especially if we consider, because we're talking primarily about middle schoolers, the internal distraction cannot match the external distraction without us all having an expectation that something's going to be missed. So I will say, because it's my podcast and I can, and I don't care if people get mad at me, I would say there are conditions that are best practices.
Right.
Now, so that's the first part. The second part is you can do whatever you want to do. Because like you said, the fact isn't going to change because you feel mad about it. And right. I understand, I think that's one of the issues that people had with me at my previous place of employment is that I would just say, this isn't going to change because you don't want to do it. I would have parents who would smoke pot in the house with their kids in the room. Wow. And then not understand that it's the same air and that the same impact on them will have it on their middle school child.
Yes.
But their bodies are chemically different and at a different stage than their child. I'm not saying don't smoke pot. Whatever you do in your home is your business, but you have to have an understanding. Even though times have changed, we as humans have not evolved to a point where there's just some biological facts that we haven't evolved away from. And that's why I suggest to parents not to give technology to children until, very sparingly until I would prefer 9, but I'll say 6, because humans will evolve to catch up with that technology. But right now we haven't evolved that much. We're using, like Adam and Eve era equipment to understand Space Invaders technology.
Right.
So there's just some things that, are simple, plain facts. And that puts you and me between parents, kids, and administrators in that weird space. Like, how do you get parents to hear that? And then because your administrator doesn't want you to chase parents out, or they don't want parents to be upset, but you want to do what's best for the kid.
Yes.
Because to me, the start and end of the sentence is always that kid, right?
Right. Yes. No, I'm so glad you said that because, we work on behalf of the children. We foster the children when they come to the school. We want them to have a safe and warm environment when they come on campus where they feel that they can learn and be successful. And we want the same for them at home. And our arms don't reach that far, but we do, articulate this is what they do need, when they're at home, and if we can, find some sort of middle ground of, we understand that things at home are different from things at school, just by
Right.
virtue of there just being so many children at school. But also the importance of, when your child is in school, we want them to be ready, and you want them to be ready, because that's part of their overall experience at school too.
Mm.
And the support that comes with that is really important. And I think children of all ages, from all backgrounds, just really need to, have that, that kind of that schedule where things are set. They know what time they're getting up, what time they're going to bed. They know what, they might not know what the meal is, but they know they're having one. They might not know what the homework is, but they know they're having some, and they know where they're going to do it and how long it's going to take them. And they know that they're safe and loved and well, and that when they get to school, they're safe and loved and well, and so that they can blossom and grow. And
Mhm.
I think that's the thing that is the bottom line for teachers. We just want the children to be their best, but we want to make sure that their basic needs are met.
Mhm.
And sometimes those basic needs are something as simple as time and space.
Mhm. And what you're really saying is conveying to parents and administrators that you're just talking about best practices and everything on the table is optional.
Right.
But while we're at school, we are striving to do those best practices because we want, that's the whole point,
Hmm.
is we want to create the
Right.
optimal learning experience for kids.
Yes.
And whatever happens at home, you can try this, but y'all grown, you can do what you want to do.
Right.
this is
Right.
what this is what we're suggesting, and this is what works here.
Right.
And I think that's a good, really good strategy, really good way to approach helping parents and teachers and administrators understand the complexity of bridging that home to school.
Yes. Yes. And that, at the end of the day, when we look at our children, we're probably all heading in the same direction, and and that being the success of the child. And we might not both be getting there the same way, and but we don't want the child to ever know that there was that friction. We want the child to know that there's that we're all on their team, and we look
Mhm.
to see them do their absolute best, and whatever we can do to support them, we will do.
Yeah. Well, I think that is a fantastic place to end our conversation because it's true. We want everyone to do their absolute best. One last thing, I guess, is there one last piece of advice that you would have for parents of middle schoolers or administrators of schools that are middle school?
Okay, I will take that in two different um, two different areas. So for parents, I would say, just, support your child, um, in in the way that they need to be supported at this time in their life,
Mm.
as opposed to 10 years from now when they're done with college. And
Or 10
support
years ago when they needed you more.
right, right. So at this time in their life, because it's middle school, they're kind of the middle child of education, if you will, and but we want them to feel that they are just as important as they were when they were the small child or the child who's graduating,
Mm,
and that so to support them for right now at this phase in their life.
mm,
And for the administration, I would say just be perfectly honest with what you're dealing with.
mm,
We're dealing with young people who are in the middle of their schooling, their formal education. They're Some of them are going to excel and do really well academically, and some of them are going to struggle, and some of them are going to move just right along, and they're going to be okay. But to make sure that there is consistency and honesty,
mm,
and that everybody on campus feels that they belong on that campus, that
mm,
there is a place for every child,
mm,
every parent,
mm,
every teacher, and every administrator,
mm,
and that makes the school whole and a healthy place for everyone.
mm. Well, thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you so much for talking to me and having me today. This has been a delight.
So that's our conversation for today. I hope you found some information that was interesting or a perspective that you hadn't thought of. If you like what you heard, or even if you have some feedback, put a comment in our comment section. Be sure to like our page and make sure that you subscribe so that you can hear when the next video comes out. Thanks so much again for joining us.